Well, greetings, Herle Burly-ites. And damn it, if we haven't reached our final live podcast of 2022. Today's show is going to be a hell of a lot of fun, I hope. We're going to look back on and break down some of the more notable political ads of the year. Back with me for this are those smooth, pated practitioners of political advertising, those high-gloss heads of campaign creative, Matthews and David Rosenberg. One raised in a conservative milieu, able to wear the most luminescent, skin-tight biking gear and look damn fine doing it, Dennis. The other from our liberal dysfunctional family, owner of 2 pairs of jeans over 5 years old, both sporting holes in the crotch, which until this very moment he managed to keep a secret. Dennis, our regular listeners will know, is a partner at Enterprise Canada and the president of its ad agency and content studio, Creative Currency. Strategist and architect of Conservative Party advertising for Stephen Harper, Tim Houston, and Doug Ford, among many others. David is a partner and chief creative officer at Ben Simon Byrne Advertising, writer of liberal ads provincially and federally since 2004 for Paul Martin, Kathleen Wynne, and Justin Trudeau's 2015 majority-winning effort. David's also a member of our Air Quotes media team, so he was super easy to get for this. Dennis, David, great to see you. How are you?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
I'm great. It's almost Christmas, man. It's almost Christmas. Isn't that exciting?
I'm Jewish.
You still get the break, though. You still get the break. So
Indeed. And I buy my mother a Christmas gift because
of course. And you get the spirit.
She was born in Scotland, converted when she married my dad. We love to have Christmas dinner with my mom.
Right. Dennis, how are you?
I'm really good. You know, I got 3 little kids who are still at that believe in Santa Claus age. So it's an exciting time in the house here.
Right. When do you open your gifts?
Christmas morning.
Oh, you're a meanie. Oh, you're a baddie. We were Christmas Eve people. That's all I could make it to. I couldn't have made it to Christmas morning.
Well, they still go to bed sort of early. So, you know, maybe as they get older, we'll switch over to the midnight opening.
Is everyone enjoying the maelstrom of the holiday season? Hanukkah is upon us, and we're down to counting the days in single digits before Christmas and Kwanzaa. Trying to fit in parties, visiting family and friends, and the stressful annual ritual known as, help me, I have 15 people I still need to buy for, and I'm trapped in this godforsaken mall for 7 hours. Yep, it's giving season, which often means it's sweating season. So I thought I'd try to soothe that level of stress with a heartwarming giving story from our presenting sponsor, Telus, and their Friendly Future Foundation. It's about a grant made to Big Brothers and Big Sisters Canada. We all know the critical role the organization plays in connecting kids to volunteer mentors, helping them overcome adversities and obstacles in life. But, you knew there'd be a but, right? For many local chapters, the number of youth who desperately need mentorship far exceeds the number of volunteers available to make a match. The result has been a huge and often closed, because of the sheer length of it, waitlist for kids who need help now. So thanks to a $200,000 innovation grant, Big Brothers Big Sisters are starting on their Little Wait, Big Impact technology project. It's a digital transformation, creating new online tools that reduce wait times during volunteer onboarding and intake when too many interested volunteers would historically drop out of the process. Documents can all be signed and uploaded online now instantly. Interviewing and training sessions are now virtual and far faster. The technology also makes the mentor-mentee matching process more effective and improves the user experience. Kids get the support and guidance they need to help them get through tough times faster. That's what the Telus Friendly Future Foundation does, a registered charity that believes all youth, regardless of their circumstances, deserve an equal opportunity to reach their full potential. This year alone, 548 grants to the tune of $10.5 million. You can learn more at friendlyfuture.com. All right, guys. I mean, this is something we've had fun with in the past. We take a look at ads that have been run in politics over the course of the year and talk about what kind of tactics people are using, what kind of techniques people are using, what the zeitgeist is in the public mindset that people are trying to reach with advertising. This year is a heavy year in the United States because of the midterm elections. So many of the ads we'll be looking at were American ads. We've got a couple Canadian ads. And then we've got some consumer ads just to get a sense of what people were doing outside the political sphere in politics these days. I want to strongly encourage anybody who's listening, if possible, to stop listening and go watch this pod on YouTube, because we're going to be showing the ads in the YouTube thing, so you'll be able to see precisely what we're talking about on this audio here. I'll try to describe them, but some of them are a little difficult, and some of them you sure won't get the full effect if you don't see it, including our first one. Our first one is one of the favorite political ads I've ever seen. It was run in Pennsylvania in the Senate election between Dr. Oz and John Fetterman. It was run by the Fetterman campaign, and it was in a part of the early fall of the campaign of this year, when they really drove Oz's negatives through the roof in Pennsylvania. One of the ways they did it was with this ad. Maybe we can take a look at it now.
We'd like you to keep your promise to us, if you please, sir.
And now I've got the #1 miracle in a bottle to burn your fat. It is the new Miracle Berry. It's lightning in a bottle. The miracle of the year. It's raspberry ketone, sea buckthorn, alpha cyclodextrin, green coffee bean extract, yacon syrup, red palm oil, Garcinia cambogia. It's a miracle flower. This miracle pill, brand new miracle.
Do you believe that there's a miracle pill out there?
There's not a pill that's going to help you long-term lose weight and live the best life without diet and exercise.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
You may think magic is make-believe, but this little bean has scientists saying they found the magic weight loss cure for every body type.
A recent study found the main ingredient in those magic beans not only failed to help lab mice, it gave them the early symptoms of diabetes.
I'll fight to secure the border so we don't have to fly illegal immigrants into airports like this in the middle of the night.
He actually had to pay the largest fine in American history for employing undocumented workers. $95 million? I can't even believe this figure.
I'm a resident of Montgomery County. I voted twice, so I feel big-time Pennsylvania.
For years, he's lived in New Jersey, and his social media still frequently shows him at his North Jersey mansion. So he is running for office in a state he doesn't seem to want to live in.
You humbug!
He's completely changed his positions on just about every issue.
At this point, Bill Cosby is a more credible TV doctor.
I know you know how much power you have. You are very powerful.
If you are really great and powerful, you'll keep your promises.
Physicians say Dr. Oz is a quack and a charlatan.
The only thing that people like Dr. Oz care about is themselves.
You're a very bad man.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Okay, so I'm going on the record as brilliant and utterly convincing. Rosenberg, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I concur. I honestly, I've loved a lot of political ads. There's been some fantastically written, super clever political ads over the years. I think this might be my favorite of all time. I mean, it is just so brilliantly done. You and I had a long Twitter conversation about this ad, Dave, and I made the point that when you have an idea like this, which you can see where the idea comes from, it's sort of a natural, but when you can get the film and you can edit the film and insert all the facts and data and other scenes that you want to insert and have it all come together, work hard to get it to come together that seamlessly. It is just such a thrill when you put something like that together. And
can I ask you, just as a side, David?
Yeah.
What would have been involved in, for those who didn't see it, so the clip integrated shots of Dr. Oz advertising miracle cures with shots from the Wizard of Oz movie. What would be involved in getting rights to use the Wizard of Oz movie?
See, that's the part that's an open question for me. I'm not sure that Midas Touch did secure the rights officially to get that. I mean, it would be hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars, or they just wouldn't have sold it at all. So it's probably a bootleg kind of operation run by Midas Touch. Dennis, you may have an opinion on that. But the one point I wanted to make about this ad that, amidst all of the detail, production and otherwise, what I think is so incredibly effective is this juxtaposition of all of what we know of the Wizard of Oz, that storybook fantasy and charm, with this litany of real world lies and hucksterisms that Dr. Oz has been peddling for however long he's been, a decade and a half or however long it's been. And
since Oprah created him.
Yeah, and that juxtaposition makes this thing so incredibly effective, that charm, storybook vibe with all of these lies in the real world. He's been pulling the wool over people's eyes for years and years and years. It's devastating.
Dennis, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a masterpiece, and you started with the most entertaining one of the lot we're going to talk about here. So everything that both of you have said, but I'll add a couple of things here. I mean, when you think about, people often will email me ads from different campaigns or other things, and we sort of go back and forth on. And I can tell you, so often I immediately look at how long is it. And when somebody sends me something that's, long at all, I just sort of dismiss it. Like, nobody's going to watch it. Like, everybody's distracted. You got to get to the point. You got to be quick. This thing actually went viral, and it's entertaining. Like, the entire, what are they going to say next? What's coming up next? And so they've done such a masterful job of editing it together as a compelling, whatever it is, 90-second sort of story here. And, when you think of it's the creative concept is so powerful, but you're helping people justify that. Is this guy a huckster? Like, it really, tying it with a fantasy, with a motion picture that everybody knows. Like, you wrap it all together. It's just like, it really is a masterpiece. And it actually went viral. It's not one of these overly creative things where everybody commented on it. Like, this thing legitimately got a lot of views.
David, let's just peel back a little bit about what they were trying to do here, because, it's interesting for a political ad. There is not a mention of politics in this commercial. There is not they're not attacking any position that Oz has on any issue. They're not criticizing him for anything political. It's right at character.
Yeah, it goes right to character. I mean,
you don't even know what party he's running for if you weren't following it closely.
And there's just so much evidence about his character that, in the ad and what the ad contains. Many people vote on these issues. How can you cast a vote for a guy like that that's been lying to the public for years and years and years, and has been called on the carpet and has been in front of government hearings and so on and so forth? It's just beyond the pale.
Yeah, I really.
Dennis, have you pursued a similar strategy before of pure character? I don't want to use the word assassination because it seems valid and true in his case, but
no, I think it's when you have an ability to actually use video clips of an individual talking that you're not wildly taking out of context. I mean, they've taken some liberties here, obviously, when he's talking about all these miracle cures and whatnot, but when you're actually able to sort of take a candidate's words and showcase them, I mean, I think you think back to some of the Stefan Dion, Michael Ignatieff kind of era advertising, taking clips and throwing them into a creative concept. This is done at a different level here. And I do wonder, I'm very curious about the rights. I mean, sometimes I guess you just rely on the studio or whatever not coming after you. I'd love to know. I think there's more to unpack there that we don't know, but the showcasing of actual video, I think, is what takes this from, an interesting creative concept to something that really, really lands.
Right. And it really, really did land. Oz's negatives, as I said, went through the roof after this ad was out there. Okay, the next one we're going to look at comes to us from Georgia, from the very peculiar race that was going on down in Georgia between the eventual winner, Raphael Warnock, and football hero Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker had, in almost every way possible, demonstrated himself intellectually unprepared to be a senator in the United States, and he had no knowledge of issues the way he talked about them, and he was prone to going off on these weird rants in his speeches that had nothing to do with politics and seemingly nothing to do with anything else other than whether you wanted to be a werewolf or a vampire, etc. And so the Republicans were trying to protect him by saying that this was all big-headed, elite criticism of a local hero and a good Georgia guy, and it was all unfair. So the Warnock campaign responds with this following ad, which is called Focus Group, and it shows seemingly ordinary Georgians watching clips of Herschel Walker on the stump. Let's listen.
You ever watch a stupid movie late at night hoping it's going to get better, don't get better, but you keep watching it anyway? Because the other night I was watching this movie. I was watching this movie called Freak Night, or some type of night, but it was about vampires. I don't know if you know vampires are cool people.
What the hell is he talking about?
Is he serious? Is he for real?
But I'm going to tell you something that I found out. A werewolf can kill a vampire. Did you know that?
What is he talking about?
I never knew that, so I didn't want to be a vampire anymore. I want to be a werewolf.
Oh my gosh.
He's talking about vampires and werewolves right now.
Y'all serious about this, right?
So I've been telling this little story about this bull out in the field with 6 cows. And 3 of them are pregnant.
There's no substance. There's nothing.
So you know you got something going on.
It makes me want to laugh, and then it makes me think we're in trouble.
But all he cared about is kept his nose against the fence, looking at 3 other cows that then belonged to him. Now all he had to do is eat grass.
This video is ridiculous. That's 35 seconds of my life I'll never get back.
Why would I want someone like that leading the state of Georgia?
Our good air decided to float over to China, bad air.
Unbelievable.
So when China gets our good air, their bad air gotta move.
It's all the same air.
Not only does it make no sense, I don't even understand what he thinks he's saying.
So it moves over to our good air spaces. And now we gotta clean that back up.
I sit and watch these on Twitter, and I'm like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Like, literally, what is he talking about?
He's completely unqualified for this really, really serious job.
No one's watching this and being like, oh man, that guy's got it together.
And sometimes, like, I read through the comments because I'm like, is anybody actually understanding, or are we just sitting here wasting time? It is embarrassing. Let's call it what it is. It is embarrassing.
They just care about getting a yes man, somebody that had just punched the button.
I think it's a risk to me and millions of Georgians to put this man in a position of power.
Let's call it what it is. This is embarrassing as hell. At all. I mean, well, you know.
All right. David, what do you think about that?
Man, that was the long version of that ad. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse as, you know, the more clips that you see and the more reactions that you see. Yeah, a super effective ad. It's Dennis mentioned this when we looked at the last one. It's letting the clips tell the story. The clips are the clips. The truth is the truth. It's all there on video. He said what he said. And what we're just doing here is capturing potential voter reaction to all of that nonsense. Of him on the campaign trail. So it's a perfect example of truth in advertising, truth in political advertising, truth well told. It's very clear that those respondents are real people. Sometimes you'll see different campaign ads where actors are posing as real people. Very ineffective technique. These people are clearly real. You can tell by the nature of how they respond. It's very extemporaneous and it's devastating. It's a great ad.
Dennis.
Yeah, I mean, I'll maybe add in a couple of things here. You know, as much as I'm sure they're real people because they don't look like actors in any way, but they are highly curated. Like I am sure that the team that produced this spot took a look at their target voters and made sure there was perfect overlap between the people they wanted to be winning and the folks in this commercial. So, you know, as much as they're real, I think it is important to sort of have that context. What I think is interesting as well, when you compare it to the first spot we watched here, it's this focus on character. You know, we're especially look at the political cycle. You know, it's sort of sucked up by Democrat, Republican, Biden, you know, Trump, all these sort of bigger things, sometimes even issues. And I noticed a number of these during the midterm cycle where, you know, in order for campaigns to stand out, they had to go after the individual or the character because I don't think you could move the needle on other things. Like there's no ad out there that's going to shift perception about Joe Biden or Trump or Republican or Democrat. These things are so baked in and hard to shift. But in a local race, when you're trying to cut through, if you can find a way to put a spotlight on an individual, I think that obviously must have been part of the calculus on a number of these campaigns. But I do think, very effective spot. And again, letting the candidate speak, having those clips, there's not a lot of manipulation going on there. You're letting it hang out there, and it's devastating.
Right. I really do think it's interesting that these ads that were so effective, I mean, there's no mention of, there's no mention of any of the issues in here. This is an anti-Republican ad. There's no mention of Roe versus Wade. There's no mention of Trump, anything like that. It's all about Walker and all personal about character. Mm-hmm. And the same as the Oz spot. Do you think that is because, Dennis was hinting, I think, let me put it more explicitly, that American politics is so polarized that the issues don't really move voters anymore. From one camp to the other. They're too entrenched. But you can perhaps turn people off about a candidate.
I think that's a case by case basis, right? I think in some jurisdictions with some different politicians, the issues will play. Here in Georgia, they had all the fodder they needed with Walker's character. They had to move votes. They figured they have to move votes in another way and not concentrate on left versus right, but rather candidate versus candidate on a character level, and was super effective in doing so. Right. Especially with like a guy that is like an absolute local hero in Georgia prior to this. I mean, I followed his career in the early to mid 80s when he was running back at Georgia. I was a huge fan at the time, but man, how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, and that was a terrible trade. So I've always hated Herschel Walker. But leaving that aside, Dennis, one of the things I find interesting is that all of the things that they highlighted about Walker were being reported by the news. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they had to expose these things to people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have seen them. But did they feel that they had to put it in an ad because news isn't reaching people and therefore they needed to force it at people? Or why did they feel the need to take what is effectively news coverage and run it in an ad?
Yeah, I for sure. I mean, the news will cover something in a cycle. And a certain number of people are watching that for sure, but it's a really fractured media environment out there. I mean, I think we all know that in terms of where people gather their info, and it's pay to play in the commercial world as much as it is in politics these days. And I spent a little bit of time in the U.S. this fall in the lead up to the campaign, and my hotel one day just had the TV on the background, and like every ad was essentially a political ad. From dog catcher to senator, and everybody in between is running political ads. And so, how do you stand out in that batch? Look, do I think big issues? Do I think can move? Of course. Do I think the parties can shift and all that kind of stuff? But when you're in a localized statewide race here, like how do you stand out? And obviously it's going after the individual is as critical as making these bigger points. In fact, I think more potential to sort of move voters when you're focused on the individual.
What's interesting?
Just Dennis, yeah, go ahead, David.
Sorry. What's interesting about this is, did you guys see the video of his concession speech given the night of the election when he lost? Did you see he sounded like, I mean, it was coherent. It was not on paper. It was off the cuff. He sounded like a normal human being. And you wonder, where was that guy during the campaign? Why was he talking about China's air and the way that he was, and vampires and werewolves? And why wasn't he a normal human being on the stump?
So often the case.
Yeah. So the word locomotive, it derives from French and before that from Latin, and it originally meant moving from a place. But the word quickly came to express sheer power, striving to describe their new hero's incomprehensible strength. More than 80 years ago, Superman's creators at Detective Comics famously dreamed up the phrase, more powerful than a locomotive. Back then, most locomotives were driven by steam, and they really were monstrously powerful. The big boy locomotive, which dragged trains through Rocky Mountain passes until 1959, could generate 6,000 horsepower. But steam engines weren't very efficient. Nowadays, our sponsor CN operates nearly 2,000 diesel-electric locomotives with 4,000 horsepower or greater, along with several hundred smaller ones that move trains around yards. And no longer do 1 or 2 locomotives haul a train behind them. Nowadays, with trains measuring 10 to 12,000 feet in length, yes, that's up to 2 miles, locomotives are often pulling from the front and middle and pushing from the end. The one in the front controls the others, and the caboose has been replaced by an electronic telemetry device. New locomotives may still look like iron brutes, but they are in reality sophisticated, computerized, and stuffed with technology. Power and braking is more evenly distributed. The train is safer and far more efficient. And CN just acquired 57 new AC-powered locomotives, which can generate 30% more traction as the train starts up. That, along with hills, is where the most exertion takes place. These modern behemoths cost a lot of money, but CN is committed to spend and do what is necessary to meet demand from shippers, and that means maintaining a fleet of powerful, efficient locomotives. After all, put at its simplest, what CN does is moving things from a place. Dennis, I was going to ask you, to your point about standing out in a crowded field of one political ad after another. We know how much people like politics, which is not, right? And so presumably they're not enjoying one political ad after another, trying to avoid them if they can. So we've just watched 2 pieces of pretty interesting creative, and we're about to watch a piece of less interesting creative. But I presume that both of you have thoughts about what you need to do to stand out in that kind of environment, to make an impression.
Yeah.
And what the role of creative is.
Well, and I think, David and I would probably agree on this one here. It's having some sort of creative idea, having something interesting that actually, gets people and pulls them in. I think one of the ones we're going to watch here in a second sort of has the opposite of that. I think there's an ability to put an argument on repeat and have something over and over again and hope that sticks. That's a different strategy. But the stuff that in this crowded market is really, getting people to actually look up at the screen, lean in, listen, stop scrolling, whatever they're doing. It's something that there has to be some sort of creative idea behind it.
Compelling, emotional, and original creative idea that people are not inured to, that they haven't seen a million times before, based on truth and rendered, as I say, in a way that is highly original. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, but that is the goal of every great piece of creative. You've got to get people to watch, and originality is the key to that. Unlike the ad that we're about to see, which requires a gargantuan media buy, as Dennis said, repeat in order to get its message across.
Okay. This had a gigantic media buy because it was produced and funded by Mitch McConnell's Political Action Committee, and it was put into Ohio to try to defeat Tim Ryan, the Democrat that was running a surprisingly strong challenge to the Republicans in Ohio, running a centrist campaign, not part of the national Democratic pitch, running a different thing and scaring the Republicans. Mitch McConnell puts this ad. Let's run it now.
Taxing Tim Ryan and Joe Biden's reckless spending. A resort in Florida? Ski slopes in Iowa? It's crushing Ohio with inflation and higher prices on everything from groceries to gas. And to pay for it all, Ryan and Biden agreed on billions in higher taxes on low and middle-income Ohio families. The problem? Taxing Tim Ryan's voted with Joe Biden
every single time.
Senate Leadership Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So there you go. That was just stock footage, news and newspaper headlines ripped across the screen. Very traditional, low budget ad. As Dennis said, presumably they're putting the money into the media buy, not the media creative and execution in that spot. I'm interested to hear what both of you say about this. Start with you, Dennis, but I have to tell you off the top, I don't get it. I can't find a logic train throughout the ad. What are these things about? I'm still wondering what the what the money for the ski chalet was at the beginning by the time I get to the end. And what do the taxes have to do with inflation? I don't know. I don't know what this whole ad's about. What is this supposed to make me think?
Yeah. So this type of ad, I mean, all of us have made this type of ad before in terms of grabbing some headlines, throwing it on some video footage. It's sort of standard political fare. As I mentioned in the lead in here, if you're going to run an ad like this, you have to have a lot of money behind it. And there's not a central creative concept here. It's a bunch of points that they're trying to make land. This guy was trying to run away from Joe Biden, sort of a centrist campaign. Boom, they vote together, sort of tied. Oh, responsible for, tax increases, inflation. I don't know that you need to remember the whole spot. I don't quite get the ski chalet thing at the beginning either. In fact, even now, I kind of want to go back and watch it again to see what that was about. But this is the type of ad that will not win you a single award. If you have enough money behind you, these type of ads can help you win an election in terms of, sticking 1 or 2 points. There's just no real creative concept. You play that to a focus group, they might spit back at you. Oh yeah, he likes Joe Biden and wow, he likes taxes. And that, would be a win, but that only works if you've got, millions or tens of millions of dollars, likely in this case, behind the spot.
David.
I am thrilled, guys, to hear you say that you don't understand the beginning of the ad either, because I just thought I was stupid on the Florida thing or the ski chalet thing. I was like, well, what the hell is that all about? I don't have enough information. But yeah, I mean, it's a typical rack 'em and stack 'em, pieces of evidence put together with audio, with video, in a way that, as Dennis said, we've all done before. But, I think, Dennis, when you've done it before, and certainly when I've done it before, I've tried to find the common thread, the tie that binds. Yeah. And then I try to ladder that up to something in a larger sense, a larger message about the opponent's campaign and where it's going, or what the opponent believes, or what his values must be in order to say the things that he said or believe the things that he believes. And here it's not. None of that is happening. It's just one non-connected factoid after another that attempts to take down Tim Ryan, and it's a terrible ad.
Mitch McConnell is a sophisticated political operator. He presumably has among the best consultants in the United States working for him and around him. How does an ad like this get made?
Well, there's Mitch McConnell's fund here. There's a number in the U.S. Congressional Leadership Fund, all those different groups, and they essentially run these types of advertisements. They're not out there making beautiful creative pieces. They're going into each state and different races. They're grabbing their 2 or 3 different points. They're tying them together. I bet you if we delved into the ad archive of the midterms, we'd find 50 different versions of that spot with just different candidates sort of subbed in and points. And they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars placing these things in hot races across the country. But that ad there is sort of 75% of what you see on television during a U.S. election campaign. It's proof points. Link into something, a couple of factoids, and away you go. And we don't know the exact GRPs behind this ad or the weighting or whatnot, but he didn't win, right? Republicans held on to the seat. I guess JD Vance was the senator elect there. So this type of stuff can, in high rotation, be quite effective.
Everything about that ad is high volume creative, high volume evidence, high volume versioning, which Dennis just talked about. It's just rack them and stack them and get it out there as fast as you can against different audiences, right? They probably do different versions for different audiences.
Right. And maybe if the Biden stuff stuck, that was enough in Ohio.
Yeah. That may have been the case here.
Yeah. All right. The next one's kind of interesting. It was an ad. There was we're going to watch a 1-minute version, but there was a 30-second version produced that had some media buy behind it and did show on television. This is an ad from Liz Cheney, who's talking about the January 6th committee hearings. I have to say, guys, I find this, I'll wait. I'll save it till after. Let's watch it, first of all. It's just Liz Cheney at committee.
As our founding fathers recognized, democracy is fragile. The sacred obligation to defend this peaceful transfer of power has been honored by every American president, except one. On the morning of January 6th, President Donald Trump's intention was to remain President of the United States, despite the fact that he knew that he lost the election. His own campaign leadership, his White House staff, Justice Department officials repeatedly told President Trump that his claims of a stolen election were false. Despite this, President Trump convinced his supporters that fraud had stolen the election and to travel to Washington, D.C. for January 6th. He was aware that individuals in the crowd had weapons and directed them to march on the United States Capitol. While the violence was underway, he placed no call to any element of the United States government to instruct that the Capitol be defended. Millions of Americans put their trust in Donald Trump. It can be difficult to accept that President Trump abused your trust, that he deceived you. But that is a fact. I wish it weren't true, but it is. Every American must consider this. Can a president who is willing to make the choices Donald Trump made during the violence of January 6th ever be trusted with any position of authority again?
So that's Liz Cheney at committee, interspersed, first of all, with clips of various presidents throughout history and the peaceful transfer of power, and then interspersed with clips of the January 6th thing. David Rosenberg. The message of this ad really resonates with me. I think the message is extremely important for every American to hear. It's very compelling. But I found this fucking boring. So it's a really important message to me, delivered in a really, not sure if I would have stuck with that for 60 seconds or not.
Yeah, I didn't.
Maybe it's your voice. I don't know what it is.
Well, I'll disagree with you a little bit and then ask a question.
And feel free, by the way.
Yeah. I didn't find it boring. I found it compelling. I'm somebody perfectly targeted to receive that message and want to like it and believe it. My politics being what they are. However, I don't understand what that ad is meant to do. What is the purpose of that ad? It's Republicans for Accountability Project. And yes, we know that there's a 30-second version of it or a shorter version of it anyway. What's it meant to drive?
Trump, I guess.
Is it about, Republicans rehabilitating their own party? Is it speaking to more moderate Republicans, never Trumpers? Is it pulling more, people who were with Trump, pulling them, back to the more traditional versions of the Republican Party? I don't know. However, what I like about it is that, again, if you've watched the January 6th hearings themselves, the way they present the information, the way they present the video, the way they package all of it up is a compelling piece of political theater. And what they've done here is cut a 90-second version of that for an ad. And so I find it compelling because I find how they're customizing, how they're packaging the message of those hearings. I find that compelling. But somebody help me answer the question in terms of what the purpose of the ad is.
Well, I think there's a few things here to unpack. There's the message of the ad, but then there's the messenger in the ad here. And this is what I like about talking about this one is it's different than the completely different than the ones we've just watched. So you could believe you could be a target audience for that message and think it's actually quite interesting. The spots, I agree, it's kind of boring, but the proof points in there are sort of powerful when you look at them all. But it relies on you thinking that Liz Cheney is a person of esteem and credibility. And, I'm not, whether she is or not, I'm unsure where the public is at on her. I think they've got extremely deep views on her father, former vice president, and that would color, if you were to play this in a focus group, I don't know that people will be talking about the content immediately. I think they would be talking about Liz Cheney. And so it's a spokesperson type ad. So I think that's quite, interesting in of itself. But the I think the target for a lot of these types of advertising, David, was they're trying to go after soft Republicans who maybe, went for Trump to stop Hillary or have been in that camp and, kind of come and go from that world and trying to shake them loose with, guys, this isn't a joke anymore. Like this has gotten so serious, like you have to, shift over. So I think that's the target. The ad's kind of a miss for me. I mean, I think, the earlier question we had on, well, why do you do advertising if it's all in the news? I mean, this was all in the news in a significant way. And so, I think if you're an American who follows politics even remotely, a voter,
you knew this.
You'd know some of this already. So it's just a bit of a miss for me. I mean, it is an interesting example of a spokesperson spot can be extremely powerful if the spokesperson brings something interesting to the table.
Dennis, can we pick up on David's question, which is, I assume that what this ad is trying to do is to speak to moderate Republicans and try to speak to their soul and get them to reclaim their party from Trump and from Trumpism. But it doesn't have either an explicit or even an implicit call to action. How important is a call to action in a political commercial?
Yeah, I think a call to action is huge. Like, what are you trying to actually get people to do? And again, this is just, it's sort of an assembly of news clips. Okay, well, the January 6th thing was really bad, and there's been a lot of really bad pieces that have come from it. Okay, for sure. But yeah, I think it was a call to action, asking people to do something. I think especially in this case, because you're asking, we think here, people to do something really extraordinary, which is vote against an ideology or a party or whatnot that they have historically been with. And so you're asking something pretty powerful, but you never really ask it.
So I watched this ad on YouTube, guys, and here's something really interesting. I said that the ad spoke to people like me that would have beliefs like mine. I'm not a Republican. If I was living in the States, I don't think I'd be a Republican. But if you read down the comment chain on YouTube, every comment, 100% of the comments are, well, I don't agree with Liz Cheney's politics, but I sure like her in this role, and I sure like her in this ad, and blah. So it wasn't speaking to an intended, what I can tell from the comment chain, a population of soft Republicans. All the commentary looked to me like it came from Democrats who appreciated the hell out of what she was doing.
Same as the Lincoln Project, right? Same as the Lincoln Project. I mean, you can almost do a litmus test on this, you guys, right? If your own partisans love the ad, it's probably not a good ad.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to speak to the people that you need to speak to, the persuadable people.
It's not swinging anybody from the center.
Yeah. Okay. Our next ad is a Ron DeSantis ad, who is the governor of Florida and perhaps the next Republican nominee for president. He seems to be the greatest challenger or threat to Donald Trump right now, and this ad seems explicitly aimed at that and not at the Florida electorate where DeSantis was running for re-election. Let's take a look.
And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a protector. So God made a fighter. God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, kiss his family goodbye, travel thousands of miles for no other reason than to serve the people, to save their jobs, their livelihoods, their liberty, their happiness. So God made a fighter. God said, I need someone to be strong, advocate truth in the midst of hysteria, someone who challenges conventional wisdom and isn't afraid to defend what he knows to be right and just. So God made a fighter. God said, I need somebody who will take the arrows, stand firm in the wake of unrelenting attacks, look a mother in the eyes and tell her that her child will be in school. She can keep her job, go to church, eat dinner with friends, and hold the hand of an aging parent taking their breath for the last time. So God made a fighter. God said, I need a family man. A man who would laugh and then sigh and then reply with smiling eyes when his daughter says she wants to spend her life doing what Dad does. So God made a fighter.
So before I hear what you two have to say, I have to say that I have never worked for a candidate that would have allowed such an ad to be put on the air about them. I've never worked for a candidate that had so little humility, that had so much ego, that they could accept such a self-aggrandizing piece of shit to be put out there about them. But Ron DeSantis is taking off like a rocket in American politics. So am I missing something? Dennis, good ad?
Well, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about here. I mean, let me. I don't even know where to start. Let me start by saying, when we talked about doing this episode here, I was thinking about ads of the year and wanted to throw this one in the mix. And when I just Googled to find the ad, I landed on People magazine, which had actually covered the spot, and they broke down how his wife had tweeted it out and sort of the story behind. This is one of the few ads of the campaign that sort of made it into a little bit of the mainstream sort of analysis of the campaign. So that's interesting. I mean, we can talk about the sort of the Paul Harvey throwback here. So God made a farmer speech and the Ram truck, ads and all that kind of stuff. So there's some historical lineage here on the concept. But what I find so interesting is this. His entire campaign wasn't really about running for Florida governor. He had that sort of in the bag and is positioning himself as the first credible challenger Trump has really had in, whatever we're talking now, 6 years or 7 years, anybody who's been a real threat to Trump. And what's so interesting for me is that I used to think the right voters were a little more, the more economic focused, more on the cognitive side, looking for tax cuts, national security, those type of bucket of issues. And for the left, it wasn't just that they wanted issues talked about in their way. They wanted to be loved, or they wanted to feel like they had a true believer on their side. And that's why almost every cycle on the Democratic side, you'd see somebody sort of rise up and then fall, because they'd always sort of managed to capture a little bit of that feeling there. And this campaign, and we'll call it a campaign for president, I guess, is expressly showing to Trump and right voters that he's one of them. He's on their side. There's a believable. He's trying to show that he really is for them. Just a different type of messaging on the right, and nobody's done it. Nobody's done it as well as Trump has to that audience until this, and that's what we're seeing here.
David, do you think this ad strikes a chord with folks?
Well, if it's made for an audience of one, Donald Trump, looking to get a reaction and a rise out of Donald Trump, then it did its job, right? Because Trump immediately came out and characterized the message as extreme. And if Trump says that, you've done something fucking extreme, right? I mean, the ad basically says on the 8th day of creation, God created Ron DeSantis. That's what this ad is telling me, Latter-day Messiah. And the ad personally, it enrages the shit out of me. It just, and I love the original Paul Harvey speech. I've studied it, having written a lot of corporate video pieces.
Sorry, give people a little background, David. Who's Paul Harvey and what's the original speech?
So Paul Harvey writes this piece. He's a radio broadcaster in the States, well known in the Midwest, I'm imagining. And in 1978, he writes this speech. So God made a farmer to extol the lifestyle, the values, the contributions of the farmer, the collective, the farmers writ large, not one human being, but farmers. Yeah. And he gives this speech at the Future Farmers of America convention, and it goes over and it gets recorded. And Paul Harvey's voice reading this speech is what ran on the Ram truck ad that was aimed at providing those trucks for farmers. And it's just beautifully crafted, like the language, the points that he's making, the truth behind it. And so DeSantis here is essentially, DeSantis's team have cribbed that speech. They've customized 70% of it's the rhythm and pattern of that speech, and they've customized about 30% of it to apply specifically to DeSantis and his beliefs. And they've made it about one Christ-like figure. And to your point earlier, Dave, how a politician lets something like that go through, I'm not sure. However, if it was meant to get a rise out of Trump, if it was meant to pull that faction of the party to his side, finally away from Trump, then it's probably doing a hell of a job.
I think some of the, was there an element of getting a rise out of Trump? Maybe, maybe not. But, the candidate's wife tweeted this out, right? This wasn't just, hey, some campaign operative put it out. Like, this was a deliberate, produced by the campaign. But there's a line, you talk about the customization. There's a line in here, jotted it down. The mother in her eyes and tell her child will be in school, so God made a fighter. I would not underestimate, some of the mythology that's being created around DeSantis and being against lockdowns, keeping kids in school, this kind of stuff. This is extremely powerful with the Republican base. And when you look at, this cycle we're about to go into for the primary here, it's not enough to be a competent governor, any of this kind of stuff. Like, to defeat Trump, it's going to require somebody who can get a whole movement behind them. And you can't just snap your fingers and create a movement. But they are trying here, and they're trying to make it about more than Florida, about more than DeSantis. This is a bigger movement, and this is their play to go after Trump.
Yeah, there's a line in there as well, just to further your point. I agree with it entirely. There's a line in there specifically about church, going to church, the protection of going to church. All right, I'm out.
Yeah, well,
speaking, I know that both of you, when you produce ads like this, give a lot of thought to the voice of the ad, right? What kind of person is voicing it? What is the tonality of that narration? And then there's a whole direction of audio. You hire an actor or an actress to do this, and you've got an audio director, and you're working this through. What kind of considerations would they have gone through to settle on this voice of God, or either that or the voice of NFL films? One of the two that they've used to narrate this.
Well, let me answer that. In this case, they were looking to adhere as closely as possible to the Paul Harvey original. This is a Paul Harvey sound-alike. This sounds exactly like Paul Harvey reading "So God Made a Farmer," almost identical. And so that here was the only consideration. But at the same time, a very rich American male, strong character kind of voice. That's what Paul Harvey's voice was.
Okay. So we've got a couple of, that's our wrap up on the US. We've got a couple of Canadian things we want to take a look at here. One of them, the first one, it isn't an ad. It's video that was put out on social media, promoted by the Liberal Party. It features the Prime Minister talking about gun control. Let's have a listen.
We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership. What this means is that it will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada. In other words, we're capping the market for handguns. In May, our government introduced measures to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership. Today, our national freeze on handguns is coming into force.
So there you go. It was a split screen. The first message is from May of this year, and then the second message is from October of this year. I guess that is supposed to imply a promise made, promise kept type of thing. I'm not feeling the social media energy from the Liberals that I felt in 2015, 2016 when I watched that. Dennis, what do you think?
No, you're talking about process here, promise made, promise kept, the features and policy measures that you're taking place. But you would think on an issue like gun control, gun violence, there's a whole host of things you could be saying there that you'd be able to make some sort of emotional argument. And so definitely, you don't get any of the feels from watching that. Now, I've always been, by the way, very skeptical on this promise made, promise kept kind of thing that politicians roll out. Like it's just not a brand attribute that politicians actually have. And so spending time talking about it is sort of kind of weird. But, traditional kind of T-bar look and all that kind of stuff. And we've talked about these kind of ads before. But yeah, I sort of shrug when I watch it. I guess content is content, but I don't quite get it.
Yeah, I think you probably have as well, Dennis. I've tested about a zillion promises made, promises kept formats. just in focus groups, and I've never had one ever come through in terms of being compelling or being a winner with people. Here's what I think would have been more intellectually honest about that ad. That in the lower right-hand side of the split screen on October 31st, I think Jagmeet Singh should have popped up in a little circle at the bottom with like a thumbs up and said something like, "We had confidence, so we supplied." Because that vote doesn't go through without Jagmeet and his team. So I don't know. It's super boring, and I don't know why anybody would really watch that ad. If you're trying to get credit for something, I don't know, something as important to the Liberals as gun control, then I don't know why you wouldn't have made something more emotionally compelling.
David, you worked with Trudeau. What are they doing with Trudeau to make him boring?
I don't know.
I mean, of all the things he is in politics, normally boring is not the thing, but that ad makes him boring.
The guy has a tremendous amount of, energy, both physical and intellectual. I don't know why they're presenting him the way they present him. I don't have answers to that question, Dave. What we did in 2015 was we tried very hard to showcase that level of vigor that he had, and not just physically. I don't know why they seem hell bent on making him as boring as they're doing.
Dennis, you got a guess?
Well, I think they've lost a little bit of the social media magic the last number of years, and I agree with you on the boring. I was thinking this the other day, looking at some of the stuff they've been putting out, and there's not a lot of the innovation, the energy, the enthusiasm that drove 2015. Obviously it hit the Trump bump, then it hit the pandemic bump. But we're sort of into a new world now. He's got a new, I think, quite effective opponent that he's up against. Like, now is the time to you're not just governing here; you're running for re-election. It is still a minority parliament, so they got to find a way to get some mojo back with him. I mean, he's got tons of energy. He's a great performer, but if you're so cautious and careful about how you present yourself online, that's what people are seeing.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to that shiny new opponent that he's got, who is using YouTube almost as a mainstream media replacement. It's like, I'm not going to talk to you through the CBC, CTV, Globe and Mail, and Toronto Star. I'm going to talk to you through my own messages on YouTube. And this one generated, as many of them have, this one generated a significant amount of discussion and debate in Canadian politics. Let's take a listen.
A leader takes responsibility when things go wrong, and this Prime Minister has consistently avoided taking any responsibility for this sordid mess.
Inflation in Canada has hit 8.1%, higher than at any time since 1983.
We have some of the highest gas prices in North America.
And we've reached another record,
with home prices across Canada surging more than 31%.
As the growth in rent prices in the second quarter was the fastest pace on record.
People forced to decide between paying the rent or buying groceries.
Well, nearly a quarter of Canadians say they are eating less than they should.
Food prices rose at our fastest pace in almost 40 years.
More Canadians than ever are reportedly reaching out to food banks to feed their families.
At first, there were shortages, baby formula.
Pharmacies are reporting panic buying as children's fever medications
looked just like this.
Drugs are more potent, more available than ever.
It's a substantial rise over previous years.
Shootings, violent crimes, gun crimes, and homicide,
stabbings, hate crimes in Toronto,
attacks on strangers,
and deadly assaults. They're all on the rise.
On the rise.
Continue to rise.
This is the toughest time in our history. This is the toughest time in our history.
A leader takes responsibility when things go wrong, and this Prime Minister has consistently avoided taking any responsibility for this sordid mess.
So there we go. Starts and finishes with an 8 or 9 year old clip of Trudeau obviously talking about the Harper government, and looking, by the way, really young in that spot, interspersed with stock footages and media reports of things that are going wrong in the country. So this is the everything is broken spot that's got everybody talking about whether everything is broken, got Trudeau to respond in a speech and say, no, everything's not broken. You can't say that about Canada. But with a 70% wrong direction number in Canada, there's got to be an audience for an ad like this, right, Dennis?
For sure. And I think we shouldn't just talk about this ad. There's sort of a series of content that that Poilievre has been putting out, on this theme of everything broken, things not working, all of this kind of stuff. And, what's so interesting about what he's doing, I mean, he's sort of the first leader, like I think we've had in the modern era that's actually a storyteller. Like he, is able to take, what some would take as complex arguments or things that are sort of facts and figures and really find ways to bring them home. I mean, he had, we could sit here and talk about 4 or 5 of these types of videos they put out that have actually started to get some real traction. I mean, he's running his own sort of almost like media company as he's running for prime minister. So I think this spot is interesting because it's hitting on his theme. It's got the right clips, all that kind of stuff. But I think what's more interesting is that, he's got a story that he's telling and unpacking in a lot of different ways, and he's doing it himself and he's getting himself out there. It's something that I don't think we've seen in Canada done this well.
Yeah, let me pick up on that. Like, I think you called it a media company. I've been calling it the Pierre Poilievre short film production company. And he's amazing at doing what he does in those films. So what I think is really interesting about this ad, this litany of all that's wrong with Canada, this Canada is broken, which is, by the way, an argument that Trudeau seems to want to fight on, having picked it up himself and saying it's not broken. So that's going to be an interesting next couple of months as they battle this one out. What I think is interesting about this ad is this is the first thing that I've seen from Poilievre's camp where we don't see Pierre Poilievre talking for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of curious as to why. When I look at those short films, whether Poilievre is talking about, the first one I think I ever saw was him brandishing a 2x4, talking about the price of lumber and how expensive it was and nobody can build anymore. And then I saw him walking through Pearson, talking about all of the issues, the health issues, the overcrowding issues, the protocol issues that were going on, like guerrilla style, like walking right through Pearson Airport and then exiting the sliding doors and taking off his mask and doing all of it
the way we all do, the way everybody does when they walk out that airport door.
Doing all of it perfectly. The man's ability to handle an immense amount of complex information and bring it down into a narrative, a 5-minute, speech, or not speech, but narrative that people can understand rationally is super compelling. However, the more I watch these films, the more I can't help but feeling that he has this incredible command of the language and the facts at hand. He's a strong leader. He's well informed. I'm hearing the narrative that he wants to convey, but the more I watch him, the more struck I am by the fact that I can't feel his empathy toward Canadians in the way he's positioning the argument, his style. In my view, he's coming perilously close to feeling a little bit smug, projecting smugness in his approach. This is just my view. And if I were advising him, I'd be looking for authentic ways, if he was going to continue to tell those stories personally, to soften his edges just a little bit and get me to feel some of the things he's talking about. Another one was homelessness in Vancouver. I want to feel those issues a little bit more. I want to feel his empathy his numbers, his popularity.
So, David, I agree with 100%. I made that same point on the Curse of Politics this very week about the fact that for all of his strengths, he's not projecting empathy and he's not making people feel good about him. They can respect him, but they're not making people feel good about him. One of the things, therefore, as a political tactician, but not an advertiser, that I like about this ad is they've taken the knife out of his hand. He's not in it. He's not sitting there beating the shit out of Trudeau. they're leaving that to somebody else. And I would always leave that to somebody else if I possibly could. I would only ever put the knife in my leader's hand if I had no other way of doing that. Dennis, would you agree?
Yeah, I think he's been his own attack dog for the last sort of number of months, but in doing so has laid this Canada is broken argument. And I think he has given his surrogates, his MPs, his campaigners a narrative to work from. And I would say that the challenge for him going forward is how does he tell his personal story in a way that, positions him as the type of leader.
Do you think he has an empathy gap?
I think, I mean, I've known him for a long time. I think it's there. I mean, he's an extremely polished professional political actor, and that can sometimes make it hard to let people in a little bit. So I do think there's an element of that, but there's also an element of what's your solutions, what are your plans going forward, and I think talking about those things will naturally sort of apply some of the softener there. But I do think there's what I like about the clip we watched here is, again, he's not having to make the attacks on his own, transitioning into the campaign making them or others, but I think he's laid a very interesting narrative foundation, probably not one he wants to continue to own himself only, but he has really, I think, laid a pretty powerful marker for the party to sort of pick up and go with.
David, any last thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I remember saying to, in the earlier iteration of Curse of Politics, when Jenny Byrne was one of the panelists, I remember saying when I first saw Poilievre's video, the first one I saw was the 2x4. I was like, wow, man, this guy is talented. That was a compelling piece of storytelling on that subject matter. But again, the more
you could tell because liberal Twitter went fucking crazy about that spot.
Yeah. but then the more I see him, the more I hear him, on this, making these videos, the more I'm struck by that empathy gap that we're talking about. And this move to create a spot like this without him has got to be intentional because of something that they're seeing in the research.
I would still say that night he won the leadership was there in Ottawa. That speech his wife gave as the intro, like there is something there that was incredibly compelling. And I hope as part of the go forward that the family story gets featured because it's quite something.
Okay, let's wrap up. Just for fun, I asked each of you to propose an ad that's not political, that you think illustrates something about what's going on in the way advertisers are talking to people these days. Dennis, you suggested an ad that ran in the Super Bowl last year by a company called Coinbase. Can you set this ad up for people and tell us what you think is interesting about it?
Sure. So when you'd asked us to come with something that sort of symbolized the year or that you thought back on that wasn't political, the first thing I did is, okay, what could I actually remember? And the first thing that came to mind was this. I mean, we could call it a kind of a dumb ad in a way. It's like the deep. So what it is it's the old, when you put the DVD in and the DVD symbol used to bounce around the screen, it's a QR code.
I'm so old, it reminded me of Pong, Dennis. It reminded me of
or Pong could be the visual throwback here. The idea was, it was so different that it would stand out in the sea of Super Bowl. Everybody's sort of watching for the commercials, and you scan the QR code with your phone on the TV, and it took you into getting into Coinbase, which has all the different Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. So what I liked about it, why I thought we'd throw it in the mix here, is just it's really different. Like it's something totally different.
Yeah, I don't even know if we need to show it because it has no. We'll show it in the video portion, but if you're just listening, there's literally no audio. It is a QR code bouncing around your screen for 30 seconds, right?
For $6.5 million that they paid to place it, probably cost them $600 to make the spot.
Right. But okay, so the first thing that I get interested in when I watch this ad is targeting, right? And how you target things, because I'm not sure why you'd buy a Super Bowl ad, because Super Bowl, people watch Super Bowl, people like me, older people, big audience, you're paying for massive audience. I could have watched that ad 100 times in a row, Dennis, and never walked up to the screen and scanned the QR code with my phone, because it would never have occurred to me that that's what I was supposed to do, because I'm 60 years old and I'm still frustrated about having to scan QR codes at restaurants to get a menu. So I didn't know what the ad was about, like not one little bit.
Yeah. Well, like a lot of Super Bowl ads, it's not just about getting people to do something while they're watching. It's about being part of the mix of the analysis, the lists, the stories afterwards. This is where, even though it's $6-7 million US to buy one of these spots, the exposure you get out of being one of the ones that's talked about. And again, I'm thinking back, it's the only damn thing I remembered from the Super Bowl this year. I think there's an element of that, and we could probably do a whole podcast on the downfall of Bitcoin and whatnot since then. And I know Rosenberg wants to get into that, but that is sort of I do think when we talk about what makes effective advertising and all that kind of stuff, and we spend a lot of time on the stuff that really matters, the creative idea, the emotions, all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it's just friggin' finding a way to stand out, making sure that people actually know you're there.
All right, well, David, you've actually done ads for the Super Bowl. What do you think they were trying to do here, and did they succeed?
Well, they're just trying to strip everything out of that 30 seconds and create something, as I said, when we were talking about one of the other ads earlier, something completely unique, which is like, it's 30 seconds of omission. And therefore, you're compelled to watch the one thing that's there and try to figure it out and ask yourself questions and remember the name brand and all of the reasons that Dennis has put it forward as something memorable and likable. And even that's what they're trying to do there. And the fact that, there have been other examples that are very, very low production cost entries into the Super Bowl market, because in that milieu, when 98% of advertisers are throwing millions and millions and millions of dollars at production to tell their story, you're doing exactly the opposite. So you're zigging while they're zagging.
You have no Clydesdales.
And that can be effective. Absolutely. No Clydesdales in the ad.
Right. Okay. And David, you suggested an ad featuring one of my favorite comedians of all time, Larry David. This is also a Bitcoin ad, so I guess this is the year 2022. Ads about cryptocurrencies. This is, of course, Larry David's in it, so it's trying to be funny. Let's listen.
I call it the wheel.
I don't think so. This is a miss.
Brother David, behold! It's a fork! I got 10 forks right here, baby!
A toilet? We're not animals. We go outside like humans.
Hancock! No king! The people shall have the right to vote. Even the stupid ones? Yes!
Edison, can I be honest with you? It stinks.
Nobody's gone to the moon, ever. Why not? It's far. It's too far. It's far.
の未来はポータブルミュージックです。バカか！出て行け！バタリがいてもやるぞ！バタリ！
Like I was saying, it's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
So is Larry David one of the people that's going to get sued in this FTX thing? I noticed that there's class action suits going against all the celebrities that they lined up to endorse this product.
Yeah, one of the suits that has been brought forward has named him and Shaq O'Neal and Tom Brady and Giselle and Steph Curry as endorsers of fraud, essentially.
Right.
So that ad has only gotten funnier since it first aired on the Super Bowl last year because of what's happened with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried and, the unintentional hilarity of Larry David being unintentionally prescient about the prospects of FTX and going, nah, I don't think so. Not going to work. It's only the reason I chose it is because of the ultimate truth of all of it, wrapped in that kind of Larry David comedy and style, which I love. And it just basically is, reinforced for me that Larry David is always right. And I intend to follow every piece of advice that he gives in 2023, because that ad only got smarter as the year progressed.
At the time that it ran, Dennis, before we knew what we know now about FTX, I mean, how would you compare this spot to the previous spot? Both similar products, trying to get you interested in their product.
Yeah, I mean, they're so different that, but what I like about both of them.
Which one would you have liked to have done?
Yeah, well, it seems like it'd be a lot more fun to have made the Larry David spot. I mean, that goes without saying. That looks like, a couple weeks out there on the road doing with all kinds of actors and sets. And so sign me up for that. But I do think it's it's an interesting lesson in that one probably cost, a couple $1 million to make and one cost a couple $100 to make. And, I don't know that one is more effective than the other. They're both, they both use something, one in the case of humor and the other in the case of like, what the hell is going on here? This is so different. They both sort of pull you in a memorable fashion. And so while they're so different, there's that similarity to them.
As a writer, I have to love the Larry David thing. Like that line about the toilet. We go outside like humans. We're not animals.
It's one of those spots too that the more you watch it, the better it gets. Like, watch it when it came out. I watched it yesterday. I watched it again here, and there's lines that I remember that it's a masterpiece of writing
with bonus political content.
It stinks.
Yeah. Bonus political content in the John Hancock scene.
Yeah.
Letting dumb people vote.
Oh, that's a great moment for us to end on. Thanks, you two. This has been a lot of fun and very illuminating today about the state of advertising, what's working, what isn't working, what people are trying. Thank you for coming on again. Both of you, great friends of mine and great friends of this podcast. And let me wish you the best of the season. Happy Hanukkah, David. Let me get that right. And Merry Christmas, David. And best of the season to everybody who's watched or listened, and I hope you watched. And we'll be back with more of the Herle Burly in January. But in the meantime, have a great break. Take care. Oh, I need to thank our presenting sponsor, Telus, and our sponsor, CN Rail. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next year. Take care.